Hello, I'm James Fitzsimons, and welcome to the Career Scoop, a podcast all about career progression, advice, and experiences aimed at assisting those who are in career transition. Today, my guest is Deirdre Mortell. Deirdre has 20 years' experience of changing the world one step at a time. She is currently the CEO of Rethink Ireland and has formerly been the CEO of the One Foundation. I'm delighted to welcome you to the show.
Maybe just to start off, could you just give us a quick overview of your career to date, maybe sharing some of the highs and lows, what you're most proud of?
Well, I'm CEO of Rethink Ireland, Social Innovation Fund Ireland, until about 3 months ago. We're just about 5 years old now. And what we do is we provide grants combined with business and capacity building supports to the best social innovations in Ireland. So those are innovations that tackle critical social issues here in Ireland. And I was involved with founding the organisation coming out of the last recession because we really believed that, first of all, there was a much bigger role for philanthropy in supporting solving our social issues coming out of the recession, but also because we believe there was an incredible pipeline of innovations being developed by grassroots communities that weren't getting the backing of philanthropy and sometimes also not the backing of the state. So we brought together philanthropists, companies, individuals, families who donate to us, and it's matched by the Government of Ireland to create a fund. And we've grown from turnover of 100,000 5 years ago up to, we're hoping, 17 million this year. So we've been able to back 130 plus innovations. And I have to say, it's the most incredible, rewarding role anybody could have.
Wow, that's a great way to make an introduction.
Yeah. So along the way, I suppose, I went to, I'm from Cork, I went to UCC, I did a BCom. I came out in 1989, which was the highest level of graduate emigration ever at that time. So everybody was leaving, and I knew, I had figured out by doing commerce that I really was not that interested in business. But that I was really good at getting stuff done. So I'd been involved in student politics. I'd been elected to the student union. I'd worked on women's issues. We'd secured the first ever female doctor in the university available to students. We'd improved, security and lighting. And we basically got a whole bunch of stuff done on lesbian and gay issues, on women's issues, and on mature students' issues. So I discovered that I was quite good at persuading people to do stuff. And I was quite good at organizing and quite results focused. So went off traveling for a couple of years, did a master's in women's studies in Trinity, and then sort of fell into a job in fundraising in Dublin, and discovered that fundraising actually sort of valued the skills that I had. The organizational skills, the people skills, the results focused. And so I joined Oxfam, where I worked for 4 years leading the Irish fundraising team, North and South. As part of that, I got to go to Rwanda a number of years after the genocide and visit. I got to go to Cambodia and Vietnam. And I just learned a ton about how do you raise funds for important causes. And I also learned something about myself. I learned that the causes I really cared about were not just about providing services, but they also included an element of advocacy. So if we work for Oxfam, do we have to raise money forever to support people who are living in poverty, or could we try and change the game so that poverty is ended and we don't need to do this anymore? And so each of the organizations I've worked with have had that agenda. First Oxfam, then Barnardos, working with vulnerable children in Ireland. And then with One Foundation, where I worked with Declan Ryan. And we worked on ending child poverty, on supporting the children's rights referendum, getting that into the Constitution, and looking at youth mental health issues and supporting social entrepreneurship. So in all those cases, looking at how can we really change the game, so we didn't think we were grant makers, we thought we were change makers. And how can we change the game to try and end this problem? Using all the resources we have, both money in the form of grants, but also in terms of capacity building supports, networks. So all those things that sometimes seem obvious to us, but really hadn't been put together in that form in the nonprofit sector. And we really pioneered an approach called venture philanthropy, which is the approach we use now in Rethink Ireland.
Gosh, that's very interesting, and I know I remember when you joined the One Foundation a few years ago. Let's put it like that, and that blank sheet of paper and that enthusiasm for creating the change, and then 10 years later, say you're 10 years within the One Foundation. What were the 3 best work projects that kind of did it for you? Just if you'd like to share, or 1 or 2, whichever comes to mind, and why.
Yeah, so one of the very special things that happened in One Foundation was we were involved in supporting Tony Bates to found Jigsaw. And at that time, that was about seeing a problem and not really knowing what the solution might be. And the problem was that young people's mental health was going the wrong way on the curve at the time. Both, we looked at the data around 12 to 25-year-olds, and both young men and young women, young men in suicide rates and young women in self-harm was not going the right direction. And we realized that the youth mental health system was broken. And so we had an appetite to try and do something. We met up with Tony Bates, and subsequently, as you know, because you were involved in that, James, at the time, Tony came on board to set up Jigsaw with our founding support, both money, but also Declan Ryan chaired the board. I also joined the board and was involved in recruiting the first senior team and negotiating the first deal with government around how could we match philanthropy and government to do something incredibly innovative to bring put youth mental health on the agenda and try and fix the broken services. And I think we all know Jigsaw has now scaled to be all over Ireland. It has saved lives. It has supported so many young people to find their way back to their best selves. And it's just part of who we are now. And it's phenomenal to look back and say, gosh, I was there right at the beginning. And I had the privilege of sitting on the board and working alongside Tony and the team for 8-9 years. So that's something I'm very proud of. And that was certainly a roller coaster. It's lovely to look back through rose-tinted glasses and say, gosh, isn't that lovely? But it was rough and tough at times, I must say, for everybody.
It's funny, if my memory serves me right, that discussing mental health or youth mental health back then really wasn't it was kind of a gritty subject, whereas now people are very comfortable. It's normal, and I would see that the output, of particularly of Jigsaw, has supported that hugely.
Youth mental health wasn't a term. Nobody ever heard of that term then. So Jigsaw was part of creating that term, making it part of our narrative now, I must say. Yeah. Maybe taking a second example, coming to Rethink Ireland, one of the really special things that I'm very proud of, which is a partially completed project, is being able to bring together a partnership between Bank of America, who donated $1 million to us over 3 years, together with the government, who've matched that, to create a fund that we call Manona Heron Fund. And really that's looking at taking very disadvantaged women and saying, how can we support them to get work, and not just work, but decent work. And we opened up a call for applications. We had a record number of applications, and we selected 6. And I think what and each of those are programs that are innovative in supporting different groups of women to get work. But what I think is really special about it is, if I just take one example, we made a grant to the Transgender Equality Network of Ireland. And one of the things I learned, because I learned so much in this role, was that transgender women have almost 100% unemployment rate. And because of the nature of Ireland and our workforce, a huge number of trans women used to work in the construction industry. So it is literally, they have loads of skills, but it is literally not safe for them to go to work anymore in that industry. And so they need to completely retrain into something else. And so that actually sets them right back from the workforce. And also, if you think about something like, I'm going for a job and I'm providing a reference, but my reference is in a different name and a different gender. So straight away, employers are going, will I call them for interview? Will I this or that? And so it's just a really, really tough road. And what I think is really special about what we've been able to do together is that I think I could speculate that Bank of America might not ever have made a grant to Transgender Equality Network Ireland. And I also think the Department of Rural and Community Development might not have done that. But when we all come together and take an evidence-based approach to who are the most vulnerable women in Ireland and how can we support them to get work, these things become possible. And I think that's what's really special about the work that we do things and we create things that actually just simply wouldn't have happened without us. So now we're working with them as well as refugee women, Roma traveller women and other very vulnerable women, supporting those programs to train women towards work.
Gosh, they're kind of two very interesting projects to, I think the organisation could be very proud of itself to support those initiatives. It's something that, you talk about the new Ireland. And my sense is maybe post-COVID, hopefully that will be very soon. I know we have a bit of a journey to go, that a lot of mindsets will have been changed. One of maybe the upsides of a COVID, so there might be more appetite for similar initiatives to other parties in society.
Okay. I think, lots of people have lost loved ones and lots of us have had close calls with COVID. So I hope that we will all come out the other side and appreciate what we have, but also appreciate the communities that we have who've come together to support us all through it. And, we are in Ireland that is much more focused on equality than we used to be post the referenda. So I feel hopeful about where Ireland will be as we emerge from this.
I think was it one of our former presidents talked about the mehel. I think that's probably the word. That was President. Sorry, my brain has got the brain freeze there.
I think it was President McAleese, but I'm not sure.
That's right, President McAleese and the mehel of and maybe that's a name we could use. My next question, and I suppose if you were back as a 22-year-old, not sure where you're going to go, is there anything else you might have done? And I know, like a mixologist or a photographer or professional sports player or a novelist, and why?
Well, when I came out of college, I was a generalist. So I actually genuinely think I could have done anything pretty much. There's a million things I could have done. And, I could have trained into lots of them. But if I think now, if I wasn't leading Rethink Ireland, what would I want to do now? I think I would just be the Taoiseach, to be perfectly honest.
And
that's what to do.
Because
it's time to rethink Ireland.
What were the first 5 things you do?
As Taoiseach?
Yeah. Maybe the choice, the blank sheet of paper, no restrictions.
So I think the first thing, and on the day that we're in it, when we'll find out later on today if the country's going on to level 5 or not, so there's lots of anxiety in the air today, I think the very first thing I would do is clean up my communications. around COVID-19. I think the government is doing decision making reasonably well, but I think the communications of the decision making is a bit chaotic and definitely is raising the anxiety there. So I think a much tighter communications campaign that's much more sensitive to where people are at is really important to building adherence and to building confidence that we're moving towards a future we all want to be part of. I think the second thing I would do is implement the massive climate action fund that they've already committed to, but that hasn't got out the door yet. Because I think one of the dangers we're in is that we're thinking about a pandemic, but we're forgotten about what were the big issues people actually voted on only in January, even if it feels like 1,000 years ago. And that's one of them. So we need to move towards a just transition out of COVID-19, but also dealing with climate justice and making sure that the pandemic doesn't, it already has, but doesn't any further increase the inequalities that are already there. So having an awareness that pandemics have always increased inequalities, going right back to the plague. And surprisingly, there's data around that I discovered when I was reading recently. So we really need to be focused on how can we try and close that inequality gap. And that comes on to, okay, we need to commit properly to the COVID payment for workers for much longer in a much more stable way. And people are feeling very anxious about that. And also support small business. So they would be a number of things. And then finally, I think the Department of Children and Equality needs to really get in close to the Department of Climate Action and the Taoiseach's office to really put a plan in place for how do we build that just transition so that it's integrated, and how do we mind our young people and our older people while we're still in COVID-19, and to put all those pieces together.
I think I would vote for that very easily. So I like what you're saying there. What advice would you give to a 22-year-old or an 18-year-old who's left school or leaving a third level? And how would you just say, come on, you can breathe, and there is a future, and there's huge anxiety with the young people. In fact, they're probably the people who are being hugely affected by this event that we're all living through.
So the first thing I'd say is I think it's a really tough time to be a teenager or a young adult. I think it's one of the toughest times we've ever had, actually. I am regularly asked to give advice, and what I say is do what you're interested in, because there's no right answers right now. So don't be doing what your parents tell you. Don't be going for the thing that you thought last year would get you a job. None of that is relevant anymore. If you whether you decide to go to college or decide you're not going to college, your life is not going to be ever shaped by one decision. So don't let it keep you awake at night. Don't let it sit too heavy on your shoulders. If you say, do you know what, I'm not going to college now. I'm not in the mood. It's not the place for me right now. That's okay. Loads of people don't go to college and they still live happy, productive, successful lives. So don't sweat it. And then if you decide you are going to college, study what you want to study. Don't decide I'm doing engineering because there'll be jobs, or I'm doing nursing because there's jobs. We don't know where the jobs are going to be. So study what you care about, because you'll get good grades and you'll figure it out. And what I would say about myself is I didn't have a plan. I've never had a plan. I have never had a career plan, and I've had a very successful career. And I have no regrets about not having a career plan. So I think a lot of pressure is applied to young people and not so young people to have this kind of ongoing plan. And I think, you know what, that just doesn't suit everybody. And you make plans, but they're based on assumptions that the world's going to continue in a straight line. And it's not looking to me like the world's in a straight line right now. So don't beat yourself up. Do your best.
Yeah, no, I would concur with everything you said there, because I think what this has shown is that we could never control anything. We thought we could, and a lot of stuff has kind of been blown up. But for me, it's important for the young people to have hope, and maybe to build on their skill sets, and to ask for advice maybe from people who are ahead of them, and maybe a number of years ahead, not be afraid to make the ask. And I remember you taught me once, you may or may not remember, that you got to make the ask. And how does a young person who is not used to making the ask, or just talking to someone, say, listen, I wonder, can you hear my story, or I'd like your advice, just to advise them how they just start off. And in fact, that's kind of starting their network and starting to build the network. So I wonder, could you share any thoughts around that? Because you have built huge networks in your various careers over the last number of years.
Yeah, so networks are really useful things, and not everybody has them at the beginning, and that's okay. So that's the first thing. That's okay. What I see with young people is there's all kinds of networking going on online that people like me in their 50s never even heard of until recently. So I see young people networking very effectively, while people like me feel completely left behind. So you know what? Older people can learn from younger people too. What else would I say to that? Making the ask. You know, if you're afraid to make the ask, I would always suggest that you sit down, close your eyes and say, okay, if I'm afraid of this, what's the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst thing that can happen? Probably the worst thing that can happen is they say no. So if they say no, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Nothing. They'll just have said no. That's okay. And finally, I would say, if they say no, don't take it personally. It's not about you. They're not saying no to you. And I always tell myself, and this has carried me through 30 years of asking, no does not mean no. No means not now. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe they've just had a fight with their wife or husband or grandmother or dog or whoever, and they're in a bad mood. Like, whatever it is, it's not about you. So you could even ask again next week if you were feeling up to it. So don't, so just ask, what's the worst thing that'll happen? And what's the worst thing that'll happen after that? And if it's not that bad, just ask.
And in your experience, if you kind of keep asking, kind of stuff happens the right way?
Absolutely. So I've had people say no in a very angry and aggressive and rude, involving F*** off. And then a year later, I've had them donate several €100,000 to my organization. So that's an example of it. No was not no, no was not no.
Oh, that's really good advice. I hadn't really appreciated that. That's such a simple way of putting it. Just not now. Yeah, I like that. How do you manage your workplace stress, or how do you have any special ways of doing it, managing it?
So I would say, first of all, that managing workplace stress is not my strength. And we all have strengths and weaknesses. And the most important thing about weaknesses is to know what they are, rather than, trying to turn them into strengths. I don't really buy that line. So I'm not particularly good at managing workplace stress. So I have burned out a number of times in my career, not just once. So I didn't learn the lesson. But the positive thing that's come out of that is that I've learned that I kind of work myself on about 7-year career cycles, and that it's good for me to take a sabbatical every 5 or 7 or so years, to just take a couple of months off, step back, breathe the air, get some sun on my face, and just chill out. And so I've learned that while I'm very committed to my work when I'm in it, I'm also capable of walking away completely and not speaking to anybody at work for 3 months, obviously in a planned way, and coming back and picking up the reins refreshed and renewed and full of ideas. So that's one of the ways I manage workplace stress.
Okay. Interesting. 2 questions left. What do you look for people when you hire people or recruit people? What are you looking for in them? Besides their ability to do a specific job, but just a human.
Yeah. So I would always say when I'm hiring that I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. And I'm serious about that because I put it in the ads. Are you a needle in a haystack? And the reason why is because I'm looking for those very special people who have strong analytical skills, but also are just phenomenal people. So I would call that, is this somebody who can make me trust them even when I know that I shouldn't, because it's not in my interests, but they just draw me in somehow into their world and I just enjoy being part of it. So that's the kind of person I'm interested in hiring. And you can't really train people for either of those. So when I'm hiring, I don't care. I'm usually hiring graduates. I don't care what your degree is. I don't care if it's in classics, engineering, digital, this, that, or the other, or anything else, nursing, sports, whatever. Doesn't matter. It's, can you analyze stuff and synthesize it and play it back to me in a way that's intelligent and that I understand? And can you talk to me? Can you win my trust? Do I enjoy spending time with you? And if you've got those two things, I'm interested.
That's a lovely answer. I could take some notes myself on that when I listen to the playback. That's a good way of looking at it. And my final question: 5 words to describe your career. To date, that is, because you've another few more careers, I think, ahead of you.
So I would say lucky, because we all know, but I think it would be helpful if more people said it out loud, that, successful careers include an awful lot of luck. And I would definitely say I've had luck. It's not all skill and tactics and strategy and hard work. It's also luck. I would definitely say fun. I don't want to go to work if I'm not having fun. So that's part of my criteria for what I want to be doing. Inspiring, because I have the pleasure of working every day with people who inspire me, both people who work for me, the leaders of the organizations we've supported. I've talked about Tony Bates in the past, and we have so many awardees at Rethink Ireland who inspire me and keep me going. And I would also say roller coaster. And the reason I say that is that I've done a lot of startups, and startups are roller coasters. And, when you're on the roller coaster, it's a lot of fun on the way up and it's really terrifying on the way down. And it goes with the territory. So you need to have a fundamental mental stability to do that. So definitely a roller coaster. That's 4. I don't know what the 5th is. What do you think the 5th is, James?
What do I think the 5th is? Describe your career. Passionate. Passion. I've known you a few years. That's the word that comes to mind to me. I don't know whether that resonates with you.
Yeah, it does. Good. I'm glad you picked the 5th one.
Yeah, well, it means you get up out of bed in the morning, there's fire in the belly, ready to go, and you're up for the day, and that's a lucky position to be in. And if you can find the role, or anyone can find a role or a profession or a job, that makes it probably easier to go to work.
Absolutely, definitely.
A good thing. So Deirdre, I'm going to finish our discussion there, and I'll just want to thank you so much for your time, and wish you all the best with the Rethink, which I love the name of it, and may that impact hugely on our society over the coming months and years.
Thank you very much. And if your listeners are interested, we're at rethinkireland.ie.
Thank you for listening to the Career Scoop, brought to you by Elevate Career Advice and Elevate Executive Selection. I'm James Fitzsimons, and I hope you've enjoyed listening. Next week, we will be talking to Kingsley Aikens about his career and the importance of networking. Hope to see you there.